So there's this kid walking down, and probably 10 years old, and the patch on my uniform was the Screaming Eagle, the 101st Airborne Division. And so he recognized it, and he looked up at me. He was just out right on the side of the road. He had a little stick in his hand. He looked at me, and he said, "Hey, Airborne, my papa gonna kill you." Something like that, you know. And, you know, and I looked at him, and I said, "Yeah."
My father didn't talk much about the Vietnam War. He spent 1 year of his life there, and he said that was enough. He didn't want it to bleed into the other stuff that he did with his life. And he did other stuff. He was a student, a contractor, a salesman, a lawyer. But, unlucky dad, he loves to tell stories. And the Vietnam War is the perfect setting for so many of them. Like being a kid just out of his parents' house, having his first tastes of freedom at 19, confronting his first real sense of danger. Even after the war, his protests for Vietnam veterans against the war were a powder keg that could blow the top off of any quiet night my brothers and I spent on the family couch. He told me a lot of stories. This is the part where I say that this guy, Bill, is actually my stepfather. I didn't meet him until I was 12. And at first, he was reluctant to tell me a lot of his stories. It's stuff he thought he shouldn't be telling a kid. But as time went on, and I kept asking, long after my brothers went to bed, I became privy to some of his most private moments overseas. Sometimes his stories were weirdly funny for wartime. He told me a story about how he and his friend traded 2 AK-47s recovered in the field for a queen-sized mattress to put on their foxhole. Other times, his accounts ran serious, like when he witnessed a friendly fire accident that cost someone their life, and I'm pretty sure it cost Bill part of his soul. But the one story that stands out most in my head is when I asked him what music he listened to when he was there. He told me that when he was in the Army, they didn't have much music to listen to. They had radios and cassettes, and if your friend wanted you to hear a song from stateside, he had to buy it on tape or record it from a radio broadcast. He said that his favorite thing to do was to take a tape a friend had sent him, and, when no one was in his bunk, to lie on the floor of his room, alone, and listen to that song. It was Dionne Warwick's "This Girl Is in Love With You." He was only 20 after all.
You see, this girl's in love with you. Yes, I'm in love.
This is the Theater and Book Depository, where we delve into stories that are just off the beaten path of history, with the people who were on those paths. Today's episode, Bill.
I can tell we know each other very well. How can I show you? I'm glad I got to know you 'cause I've heard some talk.
For a while. I also had what they call a son of a bitch, my survival knife.
Son of a
What
bitch.
they said, yeah,
That's what they called your survival knife.
yeah.
Okay.
That's what the big first sergeant told me when he gave it to me. He says, "Here, you get assigned a 45, an M16, and a son of a bitch."
And those were the things you were given on entry to Vietnam.
When I checked into the battery, yeah. And then he says, "Be careful when you go into the latrine." This is in the rear. He says, "Be careful when you go to the latrine at night because there's a big ass snake that hangs out in there."
Do you think he was messing with you, or?
Oh no, he wasn't. There's a lot of snakes. A lot of snakes in Vietnam. Men, a lot of them.
This is Bill, and this is how he always is. It's like he has this threshold for how serious he can make a story. A nervous laugh or an out-of-place detail he remembers always creeps in and makes it funny. In every serious story he tells, there's a moment of levity. You go into an active war zone, you find a snake in the toilet, and you laugh at it. So I know it shouldn't weird me out, the lighthearted way he talks about the single most traumatic time in his life, but it does anyway.
I would tape record my letters, and I would send them to my family, to my mother and my brother and stuff. I would send little cassettes. They were all jacked because I would be talking to them, and then there'd be boom, boom. The artillery would be going off right outside the bunker.
And what kind of things were in these letters with the bombs going off?
I was just telling them about, I wouldn't tell them anything bad, I didn't tell him that the guy came back from an ambush with a picture of I didn't tell him that. I remember looking at that and I said, my God.
Somebody did that.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But was there a time, was that one of the moments where you thought, oh my God, this is a warping of a human being?
No.
That wasn't one of the ones.
No, that was after that was after the time.
In 1968, Bill joined the Army because, in his words, he didn't have much going on. He just graduated high school and didn't really know what he wanted to do with his life. Sure, he was going to college, but that was mostly to avoid the draft. He did have one thing, though, that he always went to. Every Sunday, Bill would meet up with some friends from his old football team just to kind of hang out and talk about life. And then one Sunday, he was throwing around a football with his old friend Walt when something just clicked inside his head.
At the end of the first year in college, I had a D- average, and I said to myself, this ain't going to work. So by the time it got Tumby football season, I started the JC again, and we started having these Sunday things to talk. We both, somehow it came up that we both felt like we were spinning our wheels. The problem with that is you could not go to school, because if you did, you would lose your deferment and be drafted. And so that's what was hanging over everybody. Every young man that didn't have any other way out, if you didn't go to school and they found out about it, and the draft board found out, they'd grab you. They'd send you a notice, and you had to go through the process.
Go to school or go to war. It should be a no-brainer. But like I said, something clicked inside of Bill. He didn't want to be in his hometown of San Jose anymore. It was too much to bear for some reason. So?
That was Sunday. I said, let's go down and I'll meet you for coffee at such and such, and we'll go down to the draft board tomorrow morning, Monday morning, because we don't want to wait around. If we're going to go, let's get it over with. Let's start the journey now and not wait for the process to happen.
Do you remember how you told your dad?
Yeah, I called him up on the phone.
Could you tell me about that?
I'll never forget it. I called him up on the phone. I was home. I went back to the house, called him up. He says, what are you doing? How come you're not in school? And I says, well, I'm not going to school anymore. I signed up for the draft. And it was just signed. He said, what? But you said, what? I said, I went down and signed up for the draft. And he was quiet, and he said, what? I said, yeah. I said, I went down and signed up for a draft. I'm not going to go to college anymore. I'm going to get the draft out of the way. He said to me, you goddamn stupid.
He cursed him out.
And then he stopped and he said, did you really do it? And I said, yeah, I really did it. I'm signed up to go in the Army, to be drafted. And he's
and then he cursed him out again. Anger comes from fear. And today, Bill looks back at this moment as a fear response. His dad, afraid to lose his son. His dad was also an alcoholic. It strained the relationship and made communication like this pretty tough. At times, he was abusive.
And when my dad got mad, and especially if he'd been drinking, I happened to do something wrong when he was home at that time, he beat the shit out of me. He'd take his belt off and beat me.
When he says this, Bill shifts in his seat. For a brief moment, his eyes flick to the floor and are deferential. He's told me several times that he has no doubt his father loved him, but that oftentimes his disease got in the way. It's something I've heard countless times at AA meetings. When you're looking at somebody who's an alcoholic or who's using, you're not looking at them. You're looking at the bottle. He continues the story of his phone call.
And he stopped. And he said, damn it. Yeah, see you tonight. Hung up. And my mom, I can't remember what I told my mom. My dad probably called her and told her. That was, now I'll teach my family to be screwed up. I'll get out of here one way or the other.
You can hear the whistle blow 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles. You can hear the whistle blow 100 miles. Lord,
When you get off the plane, the smell hits you, the smell of bamboo. It's a lush, pungent kind of smell. You see all these people and everything, and you know you're in a different world, than you've ever thought of.
In fall of 1968, Bill arrived in South Vietnam. Besides his home life, Bill actually had some very altruistic reasons for getting into the war. His uncle was a B-52 pilot in World War II and Korea. Even though the war was splitting the country apart at the time, Bill subscribed to the red-blooded American theory that it was time for him to do his part. He envisioned himself going to South Vietnam as a liberator, defending them against the terrors of the North Vietnamese army.
When I got off the plane coming in, we had to take a bus from the airport to where you checked in, and that bus had steel mesh on the windows, so people couldn't throw grenades through there. And just this little trip from the airport to the place where I was going to stay for a couple of days until my orders came through, there wasn't any big badass soldiers around there, but there was obviously people that would throw grenades through the windows.
Liberators, he thought, didn't come in buses with steel bars on the windows. He got the feeling that the people of Vietnam didn't want him there. This feeling only solidified as his tour went on.
For some reason, I was allowed, they wanted me to go down to Da Nang for some business. Da Nang was about 30 miles away down the street, or down the highway. You're going through the village, 2-lane road, not marked or anything. There's people walking or riding their motorcycles and stuff. So there's this kid walking down, and probably 10 years old. And I'm rolling down like this, and I got my foot up. I got my rifle sticking like this, and I'm just kind of having a good old time looking at all the sights in this village and stuff as we're going by. And the patch on my uniform was the Screaming Eagle, the 101st Airborne Division. And so he recognized it, and he looked up at me. He was just out right on the side of the road. He had a little stick in his hand. He looked at me, and he said, "Hey, Airborne, my papa gonna kill you." Something like that, And, and I looked at him, and I said, "Yeah. I was fighting a war in a country that didn't want us there."
Because he had a year of college under his belt, Bill earned an officer position. He was an artillery officer. They gave him the choice between infantry and artillery seemed like it would be farther from the fighting. Bill served in the 2nd Battalion, 11th Artillery, 101st Airborne Division. This is the complicated name they give to people who drop bombs. Bill worked with 155mm howitzer cannons. If you Google them, they look like robotic fingers of God pointed at the sky, maybe declaring war on heaven. Bill tells me it was also ear-splittingly loud to be next to it. Bill was the assistant fire direction officer. If you've ever seen a movie where somebody is getting shot at and says, "Get me fire support on that hill," and then shouts their coordinates into a radio phone, Bill was the guy on the other end of that radio. People called in coordinates of things they wanted blown up. Bill related to his team. They did the math with slide rules, pencils, and basic trigonometry. They calibrated the cannons, and then his team sent out the explosive shells. They had a computer there, but it was a computer from the 1960s, because it was the 1960s. And it could take up to 30 seconds to a minute to print out results. Bill said his team could do the math and have howitzer rounds in the air faster than the computer results could come out. He is very proud when he tells me this. I guess for all his bad grades back home, Bill was pretty good at math. Every week, a helicopter came by to drop off supplies. Twice a month, they would get sea rations. Once a month, they would get a few boxes of cigarettes and candy. If they were really lucky, every few months they would get a few cases of beer. It's the candy that gets me, almost like it underscored how young the people fighting this war were. Bill was only 20 at the time. Bill chose an artillery position because he wanted to be as far from the fight as he could, but still, he was never truly safe. Artillery always has to be close to the danger so they can provide direct fire support. You can't shoot the bombs from half the country away. Plus, adding to the danger now, if you were Viet Cong getting bombs dropped on you every day, wouldn't you like to find where it's coming from? Bill's battery changed their location often, relocating by helicopter. His fire bases were usually some jungle clearing on a hilltop, somewhere between the city of Hue and the Laotian border. But no matter where he was, Bill could always see tracers from a firefight in the distance. Some nights, He and the other soldiers would look at them curiously, maybe grab a snack, crack a beer. I asked him if he ever thought about helping those fights, maybe jumping on the guns. He just shook his head.
Because if you've been under fire, it's nothing to watch going on across the way. Nothing. As long as there's no ordnance coming your way.
Was it a thing of that's not a danger to me, or was it more of a thing of like that's not something that I can help with right now?
Or was it something that's not a danger to me? I'm not part of that battle, and that's just the way it is. For this battle, I'm over here watching, and way out of harm's way.
Do you think there was an element of like desensitization there?
I don't know. The first time I was in a mortar attack, I was in the field at a fire base in a bunker, and also the floor of the bunkers are not they're dirt. It's just the ground, and I was just getting ready to walk out, and we had to like take a step up to get out of there. We couldn't just walk out. We had to take a step up. The first time I was under fire, I was in that bunker, and I heard a boom, boom. And I heard something, and when that happens, immediately somebody yells, incoming,
Bill's bunker didn't have a door. It had a piece of canvas cloth hung over the entrance.
And I grabbed my steel pot, my helmet, I call it a steel pot.
So when the first enemy mortars landed,
and I was just starting to go up through the canvas to go out.
The shrapnel went right through it.
And this shrapnel came right through. It caught me right in the cheek. Canvas goes back like that, and I put my hand up like it didn't hurt. Just I put it up like that, and I looked down, and my hand was covered in blood. I go, oh shit! And so instead of running out the door, I hesitated. And when I hesitated, 2 more went off. I couldn't hide in the bunker. I didn't get my ass out of there. So I went out the door, boom, and the first thing I see is this lieutenant, who was my age, sprawled out dead. He was dead by the time I got out the door because he took a whole blast of from the mortar round. Yeah, if I had not hesitated, I would have taken the same blast that he did. The Viet Cong, or the North Vietnamese, whoever was firing, they knew exactly where the center of our battery was. They knew where to put those rounds. I went down to we were taking all the wounded people down to the fire direction bunker. And I went in there, and the medic, he says, what's going on with you? I said, I guess I got hit. And he went off. He said, it's just a graze. He says, you're okay. And I said, yeah, that's what I thought.
They asked him if he needed an evac. He said no. And then they left. Bill's first mortar attack left several people wounded and at least 1 dead. It occurred to him years later that if he evacuated, not only would he have gotten a Purple Heart, maybe he would have gotten out of the war early. Thank you for listening to part 1 of Bill from the Theater and Book Depository. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give it a like on our SoundCloud page or visit mattrsimons.com for more audio storytelling like this episode. This episode was written by Matt Simons. Our executive producer is Matt Simons, our editor is Matt Simons, and our lovely intern is Matt Simons. Although the budget is getting pretty tight, we're probably going to have to fire one of those guys. A special thanks to Bill Tyson for appearing in this episode. Songs used in this episode were This Girl Is in Love With You by Dionne Warwick and 500 Miles by Joan Baez. Please support the official release. Finally, if you or someone you know has experienced something just off the beaten path of history and you'd like to talk about it on our show, contact us through our website at mattrsimons.com. That's mattrsimons.com. Join us next time for Bill Part 2, where the soldier we're following starts to see the people around him changing and warping to fit the war.
And he says, what's going on here? I said, I'm not going to fire it. He says, they're not enemy soldiers. They're people that cut firewood. I says, those are the same people that would go down there every day.
All that and more next time.